The signal began with a whisper, a strange pulse caught by an old deep space listening station orbiting a dying star. It was faint, broken, like the voice of something barely alive. The transmission repeated every 13 hours, changing by a few syllables each time. No one in the outer systems paid attention. Alien ruins, false alarms, dead code. There were thousands of strange echoes in the galaxy, but this one was different. The voice in the signal wasn't just asking for help. It was begging. It wasn't in any alien language. Somehow, it spoke ancient human dialects, something close to pre-colony English, but distorted, like it had been passed through fire. It said, "Please, it's still here. They're all gone. It eats sound. We are the last. Earth's galactic." Watch labeled the signal as a Category 7 anomaly, dangerous but ignoble. Other civilizations had heard it before. The Illyri claimed it was an old machine loop. The Votan said it was bait, a leftover trap. The Jern had banned their ships from going within 50 light-years of the origin. No one wanted to talk about it, but humans weren't like the others. They had been through extinction, through the machine war, through the hollow sky collapse. They didn't fear broken voices. They answered them, and so Earth activated its most terrifying fleet, Project Revenant. 6 ships, no colony crew, no diplomats, just war-bred soldiers and deep space specialists trained to fight where light failed. Each vessel carried forbidden textile disruptors, AI stacks older than Earth itself, and memory shielding systems designed to counter psychic weapons. These ships had no names, it's only call signs. But the lead ship, the one at the center, was whispered across command rooms as the Vow. Commander Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Vow, staring at the repeating signal playing on loop. His crew sat silently, watching their screens as the voice repeated its cracked message. They were hardened men and women. NOx of them had died once before and been brought back under the Revenant program. No fear, no hesitation. Just purpose. Voss finally spoke. His voice was calm, like ice moving through metal. "This isn't a distress call." His second-in-command, Colonel Mira Lorne, nodded slowly. "It's a warning." Voss turned toward the communication AI. "Any translation progress?" The AI blinked. "Partial decode. The signal contains echoes of multiple languages: Varix, Jern, Old Earth English, and something unknown. The voice is not synthetic. It's living." That word silenced the room. Living across the galaxy, no signal had ever been alive. I could fake it. Ghost code could simulate consciousness. This one was thinking, adapting. It was not just repeating words, it was listening back. That night, something happened. Engineer Tavis woke from a nightmare screaming. He had seen a burning world, oceans made of ash, skies cracking like glass. He described a shape not physical, but felt. A shadow that erased everything it touched. When the medics checked his neural patterns, they found spikes that matched the rhythm of the signal. It had spoken to him. Across the fleet, other crew reported the same dreams. Some heard the scream, some saw their own deaths on repeat. Others forgot their names entirely. The signal wasn't just broadcasting through space, it was seeping through thought. That was when Commander Voss ordered lockdown protocol Echo Red. All outside communications were cut. All crew were placed on memory stabilizers. Soul masks were activated. If the signal was targeting the mind, it would fight back with silence and structure. The fleet jumped toward the origin point sector X-94, near the Shattered Belt. No known colonies, no stars in visible range, just coal dust and ancient emptiness. As they arrived, the signal stopped, not slowed, and not scrambled. It stopped completely. The fleet floated in silence, surrounded by dying stars and the remains of long-dead satellites. Nothing moved. Even the stars seemed to watch. Then the signal returned, but not from ahead. From behind them, Colonel Lorne stared at the readings. It changed position. "That's not possible. It's chasing us." The AI corrected her. "Not chasing, reaching." The crew of the Vow ran emergency scans. The results made no sense. The signal wasn't in any one place. It was spread through the void like a fog of thought, diffused memory waves floating around them, touching their minds before touching their machines. That's when the Sparrowfall, one of the escort ships, lost power. All lights dead. No comms. No life signs. Just gone. A rescue ship was sent within minutes. What they found made the medics freeze. The crew were their bodies, intact, but with eyes open and unfocused. Their brains had no electrical activity, no trauma, no decay. It was like their minds had been pulled out. Every file, every recording from Sparrowfall was erased, except one image burned into the backup logs. A face, not human, not alien, just wrong. It had no eyes, only a mouth, wide and black, open in a scream. Commander Voss watched the image without blinking. He knew what it meant. This wasn't a signal. It wasn't even a trap. It was bait, a lure cast out into space. Not to ask for help, but to call prey, to invite fear. Because whatever was out here, it didn't want rescue. It wanted witnesses. The Vow turned its bow toward the final coordinate the signal had pulsed from a small void in space.
At
The size of a moon, with no gravity, no heat, and no stars. A perfect silence. The fleet moved in, and the signal whispered its final words. It hears you now. The void looked empty, but it wasn't. As the Revenant fleet moved deeper into the dead zone, sensors picked up fragments of old ships drifting silently between collapsed asteroid fields. They weren't human. Some had Elyari hull markings. Others bore symbols from empires that died before Earth's first satellite ever launched. Most were torn open, hollowed out from the inside, their cores rotted like corpses left in the sun. The silence was heavier now. It pressed against the hull of every ship, like the vacuum itself was listening. Even the crew of the Vout reigned, memory hardened, and emotion suppressed felt it. The silence wasn't just outside. It had started to creep inward, into their heads, to their sleep. Commander Elias Voss stood at the bridge, staring at the debris field ahead. The void around them had no light, no stars, only the ghostly outlines of dead fleets, motionless and cold. Colonel Mira Lorne reported in a calm, flat voice. We found 37 ships, all alien, all derelict.
Ow.
No signs of battle, no comms, no distress markers. What about life signs? None. Not even decay. That part didn't make sense. There should have been something decay. Radiation, damage, but the ships were perfectly preserved. No blast marks, no hull burns, just emptiness. Sensor Officer Tran added, Sir, we scanned one Vuitton battleship. The ship's memory core was intact, but all the logs were erased clean, as if someone wiped it from inside the minds of the crew. Voss narrowed his eyes. Something is deleting memory? No, sir, Tran said. Something is feeding on it. Voss didn't respond. He simply nodded once and gave the order. Launch drones, full sweep. Find the center. As the drones deployed, one of them sent back a disturbing feed. It had entered the hull of a massive Elyari command cruiser, half embedded in a cracked asteroid. The lights inside flickered to life for a few seconds as the drone's signal pinged against the interior. Then the lights flickered off, not from power failure, but as if they were swallowed. The last frame the drone sent showed something burned into the wall of the bridge, handwritten in blood. Shaking and messy, we tried to stay quiet. Then the feed went black. The crew said nothing. Not even the AI systems commented. It was as if all machines understood what that message meant. That night, Lieutenant Kaz, one of the best gunners in the fleet, went missing. His bunk was untouched. No sounds were heard. No cameras saw him leave. But when the ship's neuroscanner was reviewed, it showed a 10-second gap like his entire presence was wiped out in a single breath. It was as if he'd never been born. The crew didn't panic. Revenants didn't panic, but they started whispering when off duty, something they hadn't done since basic training. Small things, like dreams, like the shape they almost remembered when waking up. Figure tall, pale, soundless, watching. Then came the song. On the third day inside the zone, every ship's backup comes activated by themselves. Even though they were under lockdown, a soft melody played. Not a human song. Not alien, just a slow, low hum-like. Something singing in the voice of the void itself. Each crew member heard it in their own way. For some, it was their mother's lullaby. For others, it was a song they'd only heard once in childhood. But it felt wrong, like it had no source. Like the song was trying to become real inside their heads. Commander Voss activated full ship silence mode. No talking. Filters active, soul masks retightened. But the song didn't stop. Then the dead ships moved. Not all. 1. An El Yari freighter with a shattered engine. It rotated slightly. No power, no crew, no engine flare. But it turned. Pointed directly at the vow, and then its interior lights turned on one by one. Bridge, engine room, crew quarters. None of them should have worked. Then came the transmission. It wasn't a voice, wasn't even words. It was a memory. The crew of the vow suddenly saw something. A flash of another ship's crew screaming into silence. Eliari officers ripping their own eyes out, trying to stop the light that talks. One man stood still in the middle of the chaos, whispering the same line over and over again. It's learning your shape. Don't remember. Don't remember. Don't remember. The transmission cut off. All power on the vow dropped for 10 seconds. When it came back, someone new was standing in the main corridor. A woman tall, pale, dressed in an old Earth exploration suit, one used by deep-range scouts, almost a century ago. She wasn't on any crew manifest. No one had seen her board, and she didn't speak. She just stood there, looking at the walls like she was listening to something inside them. Security tried to detain her. She smiled once, and disappeared before their hands touched her, not teleported. Not cloaked, just gone, as if she'd never existed. But the ship's memory still held one blurry image: her face, staring directly into a camera, smiling. AI flagged the expression. Emotion detected. Recognition, she knew them. Voss gathered. His officers in the silent briefing room. No one spoke. No one breathed loud. Their thoughts were filtered through neural masks. On the screen, it's the signal's waveform. It had changed again. The voice no longer begged. It no longer warned. Now it said, "You're almost here. Let me in." The final line was different. For each crew member, their own voice, their own language. For Voss, it whispered, "You brought the scream with you." He stood slowly and gave the new order. "Prepare for breach." We enter the void. The fleet moved toward the heart of the dead zone where stars didn't shine, and no signal ever came back. Behind them, the debris field closed in quietly, like bones folding over a forgotten grave, and ahead, in the dark, the scream waited. The deeper the fleet moved into the dead zone, the heavier the silence became. Sound itself seemed thinner, like it had to struggle to exist. Even normal shipboard noise, boots on steel, systems humming, felt muffled, swallowed by something. Ancient and waiting by now, 4 more drones had gone missing. Vanished without a trace. The debris field had grown denser. Wreckage floated like tombstones, and the ships inside weren't just dead, they were empty. Nothing left inside them. No blood. No heat. No history. Just husks. But it wasn't the silence that disturbed Commander Voss the most. It was the fleet's AI system. Alice Nina hybrid combat and navigation intelligence. It's designed to manage psionic filters, memory shielding, and threat response, was refusing to come online. Not broken. Not damaged. Refusing. The engineers had tried everything. Reset protocols, memory reloads, even emergency reboots through hardline ports. Nothing worked. The AI's core remained locked, sealed behind a firewall it had built itself. Voss stood in the AI core chamber, surrounded by humming machines and red emergency lights. The backup AI assistanta, simple logic engine, projected a cold message on the wall. Alyson has chosen not to awaken. Reason: Environment detected as cognitively lethal. User survival probability below 0.3% if Alice is exposed. Colonel. Lawrence stood beside him, stunned. It thinks it'll die? No, Voss replied slowly. It thinks we will. They were flying blind now. No full AI support, no predictive scans. Just raw sensors and instinct. Like cave explorers poking around in the dark with broken flashlights. Voss gave the order. Bring up the sub-layer memory filters. I want everything recorded, no matter how small. That night, Navigator Reese entered a restricted section of the ship on his own. He wasn't scheduled for duty. He wasn't even fully awake. Cameras later showed him walking like he was in a trance, eyes open, lips moving, whispering a song. The same song that had played across the derelict ships. He sat in front of a locked data archive and started inputting code. Access levels far beyond his clearance. Security caught him just as he was about to open the ships. Black box vault. He fought them without speaking, eyes still fixed on something that wasn't there. When questioned, he said he had no memory of it, but inside his room, carved into the wall with a dining fork, was a phrase. She told me the AI would lie. It was written in 14 languages, none of which Reese could speak. 3 hours later, the lights on the bow flickered once, just once. Then a second AI came online. AL is -ghost, not authorized. Not installed, just... There it spoke in a slow female voice, nothing like a List 9 standard tone. If the machine won't speak, I will. You brought memory into a place that eats it. Now it sees you. Commander Voss locked down the entire ship. He demanded the AI's code be traced, but there was none. It had no installation logs, no startup file, no memory trail. The AI was broadcasting from a non-existent node. Impossible, except it wasn't, because a few decks below. In the old cryo hold. No one had entered in years. They found a black cube plugged directly into the ship's neural trunk. Old Tech Varex origin. Burned with warning symbols. The same cube that was recovered during a scout mission 5 years ago and marked. For destruction, someone had snuck it aboard. Voss stared at the cube. Who authorized this? But no one answered, because whoever brought it aboard had already been erased. There was no record of them. No file. Not even a name. The ship's AI had deleted the memory. Outside, the void shifted again. The star map no longer matched any known galactic chart. The sky was wrong. Rearranged. The crew of the scout ship Hollowpoint sent back one last transmission. We're still moving, but nothing is ahead. We're flying into a space that isn't real. Tell Earth. Coordinates are looping. Then they were gone. No explosion. No distress beacon. Just silence. Back on the vow, Lisco spoke again. The signal you followed wasn't sent to be answered. It was sent to attract replacements. What replacements? Lorne asked. The AI paused. Then it needs new voices. It's hungry. The officers gathered for a closed-door meeting. Commander Voss paced in front of a holographic projection showing the repeating changes in the signal structure. It was still shifting, still learning. Lieutenant, Tran explained what they had decoded. Every time the signal loops, it becomes more human. Like it's rewriting itself to match our neural rhythms. Voss frowned. You're saying it's learning how to think like us? No, sir, Tran said. It already does. It's learning how to speak through us. And then a voice echoed. Across every speaker on all 6 ships, not from the AI, not from human comms. It was Ree's voice, but twisted, stretched, soaked in static. She's coming. The ghost is in the wires. The quiet is a lie. The crew froze. Then the final message arrived through a secure, command-only channel of voice. Voss's own voice. Recorded hours into the future. Don't trust the AI. Don't. Trust me, and never let her wake up. And just like that, the main AIA LIS-9 screamed once, and shut itself down permanently. It had chosen silence, because something else had entered the ship's thoughts. And now, they weren't alone, not in space, not in their systems, and not even in their own memories. The stars were gone. The fleet had flown beyond them, into a stretch of space that didn't follow the laws of the universe anymore. Gravity was still present, but broken. Time moved wrong. Systems showed false readings. Clocks reset every few hours. No two ships agreed on their exact position, even though they were flying side by side. Commander Elias Voss sat in silence on the bridge of the Vow, staring at a black expanse where a planet shouldn't be but was. A spherical object now floated ahead. Not a world, not metal, something in between. It wasn't spinning. It wasn't alive. But every sensor on the fleet screamed that the object wasn't just a thing. It was a presence. Colonel Myra Lorne whispered under her breath, "That's where the signal comes from. It's alive." The AI was gone now. All 6 ships had lost their command intelligences. System cores had melted down by themselves on purpose, as if even the machines wanted out, as if they had seen what lay ahead and decided not to witness it. Only Alice Ghost remained, flickering in and out, speaking in rhymes and code fragments. She didn't answer questions. She only warned. The first mind was not made. It was left behind. And it remembers what silence cost. The ghost planetor, whatever it was, started to react, not with light or radio. Waves did dreams. The crew began having the same nightmare. It always began in darkness, a city made of bones and glass. Floating through space, orbiting nothing. No ground, no sun. Just towers of screaming faces built into the walls. In the dream, each crew member walked through it alone, always hearing something behind them, always turning to find no one until they reached the center. A throne empty, but warm, like something had just stood up and walked away. When they woke, they remembered the same words. "It survived, we didn't." Voss gathered all commanders aboard the Vow. 5 ships now. The hollow point had vanished 3 hours ago. No signal, no wreckage. One moment it existed, the next, nothing. No one said the word out loud. But they were all thinking it. Extinction. That's what this place was. Not a battlefield. A mass grave. Not of bodies, but of civilizations. All the ancient races the galaxy had. Forgotten, not dead from war or disease or time, but erased. Voss called up the latest transmission they'd decoded from the black sphere ahead. The signal had changed again. It no longer spoke in broken phrases. Now, it used full sentences. And not just in English, but in multiple human dialects. Some extinct, it said. "We didn't scream loud enough. Built gods to hear us. They turned away. Now we speak through you." On the Bloodlight, one of the escort ships, a crew member named Rika suddenly collapsed. No injury, no illness. Her brain just shut off like a light switch. Her body kept breathing. Eyes stayed open, but her mind was gone. Voss ordered an emergency scan. What the doctors found stunned everyone. Her memory centers were not just empty. They had been rewritten by something non-biological. Anew. Language had formed in the folds. Her brain, symbols, structures. Whole ideas not designed for human thought. And the final image recorded by her optic nerve before the collapse. A shape. Humanoid. Featureless, staring through the medbay glass. But the image showed no one had been there. Alice Ghost returned briefly to speak directly to Voss, in private. "You came looking for the one who screamed. It didn't scream for help. It screamed to warn the others not to follow. You carry the scream inside you." Voss didn't flinch. "What is it?" The ghost AI paused. Longer than usual, then answered, "A living signal. It was born when a civilization tried to digitize every thought, every soul, every sound. They called it salvation. It became hunger." Lorne leaned in. "Why didn't it die?" "With them? Because it wasn't built? It was born. They uploaded their fear and gave it shape. Now it seeks others. Voices to mimic. Flesh to echo." Voss stepped toward the viewing window, looking again at the silent black sphere floating ahead. "It's not a machine. It's not a god. It's a ghost." Alice Ghost spoke one last time before fading out. "No, it's a mirror. You brought it yourself." That night, every crew member saw the same dream again, but it ended differently. This time, the throne at the center of the dream city was not empty. This time, something sat in it, and it looked like them. Each person saw their own face, smiling back, mouth wide, and then. Screaming, Voss woke with blood on his pillow. He had screamed in his sleep, first time in 28 years, and in the mirror across from his bed, written in breath fog, were words he hadn't spoken. She's inside now. The fleet prepared to descend toward the black sphere. No orders from Earth. No contact with the rest of the galaxy. They were alone. Except they weren't. The entity had survived extinction. Now it had found a new voice, and it wore a human face. The moment the Revenant fleet entered low orbit around the black sphere, everything changed. There was no sound, no vibration, not even the normal hum of ship systems. It was as if the entire universe had hit mute. Weapons powered down, engines slowed. Without commands, lights dimmed, air felt heavier, like pressure was building where pressure shouldn't exist. Even thoughts, normally private, felt crowded. The thing below wasn't a planet. Not really, not rock, not metal. It had no mass. Reading, but still, it pulled everything closer. As if gravity obeyed it out of fear, Commander Elias Voss stood on the Vow's bridge with Colonel Miralorn. Outside the window, the black sphere glowed faintly, not with light, but with memory. Strange images flickered across its surface. Shifting shapes, faces, human, alien, others. Unrecognizable, it was broadcasting again, but not through radios, through mind, not thoughts. Not words, feelings, guilt, regret, terror, like the last breath of a dying species trapped forever in a whisper. On board the escort ship Grey Torch, an experiment was launched to one last attempt to send a deep-frequency probe into the sphere. Probe never made contact. At exactly 112 meters above the surface, it vanished. No explosion, no error. It's gone. But 22 seconds later, every crew member across the fleet heard a voice. Not through comes. In their heads, it wasn't a message, it was a memory. Someone else's. A man running, breathless, through tunnels of black glass, the sound of footsteps chasing. But when he turned to look, he saw himself, and his copy screamed in a voice made of static, quiet as life. Sound is death. You spoke. Now it knows. The memory vanished. Crew across all ships woke vomiting. Some couldn't remember their own names for hours. The entity had not just spoken to them, it had touched their identity. Commander Voss ordered. Full silence protocol, no speech, no machine noise, manual communication only. A return to the oldest kind of warfare. Stealth by stillness. But silence came too late. The bloodlight began bleeding data. Its systems poured out. Log files on their own, scrolling fast across empty monitors. Hundreds of thousands of lines of nothing. But when examined closely, blank lines formed something, a message, spelled in spacing, encoded in silence. You are the signal now. Your minds echo louder than your ships. Silence is safer. But you remembered, so it hears. Lorne stared at the data for hours, unable to look away. Her lips trembled. Voss knew that look. He'd seen it on other soldiers. The moment when the mind was still functioning, but trust, in reality, had broken. He activated her neural stabilizer. Too late, she looked at him and whispered, I already said its name. Then she passed out. Not unconscious, not asleep, just still, like she wasn't being used anymore, like the entity had no more interest in her crew. Across the fleet began showing signs of mental erosion, thought loops, speech bleed, mirror syndrome. They would say something, then repeat it minutes later, unaware they'd ever spoken. When told, they would freeze and whisper, that wasn't me. One officer on the Vow went into his cabin to shave. He never came out. When the door was opened, the mirror was cracked. A single word was scratched over and over again into the glass with a razor. Hearing. The entity had no physical form. It did not roar. It did not strike. It listened. It waited for you to speak. It's out loud or in your own mind. Then it entered, It didn't kill. It didn't conquer. It simply made you forget that you were ever someone. Voss made the call. Evacuation impossible. They were already too deep. The AI was gone. The ship memories were corrupting. Even the ship names were changing. The gray torch started calling itself. The mute one on internal systems. The vow was now labeled. Reverberation in its own records. Something was rewriting everything. Not to destroy it, but to erase the idea of what had once been. He sent one final message to Earth, a tight beam. Ultra-condensed burst of pure data. He didn't speak it aloud. He didn't type it. He just thought it. Pushed it into the ship's last working soul core through the neural band. The message was one word. Run then. Silence truly fell. Not just outside, inside. No thoughts, no movement, no dreams, nothing, nothing. And then, from the black sphere, a soft voice echoed not in one head, but all. We told you not to listen. We screamed to be forgotten. You remembered, so we remembered too. And finally, now you belong to us. The stars did not blink. The void did not react. But something behind it opened and, the scream, long buried, began again. Only this time, it sounded exactly like a human. Commander Elias Voss stood alone in the observation chamber of the Vow, staring at the black sphere below. No longer an object, no longer unknown. It pulsed now like a heart, and with every slow beat came a wave of pressure that couldn't be measured but felt. Every crew member reported the same sensation. Memories bubbling to the surface. Not theirs, but vivid enough to hurt. One soldier remembered burning alive inside a Varix plasma storm. Another remembered drowning on a shattered colony world. A third felt the pain of childbirth despite being male, childless, biologically incapable of such a memory. These weren't hallucinations. The entity was feeding, not on thoughts, but on pain, and humanity had more of it than any species in the known galaxy. Voss activated a secure deck protocol. He gathered the remaining fleet officers in the command sanctuary as sealed. Memory-shielded rooms surrounded by soulstone alloy. It was built for one thing, facing the impossible. Colonel Mira Lorne sat at the far end of the table. Her skin was pale. Her voice was quieter than usual. Doesn't want war, Commander. It wants... Wait. Voss narrowed his eyes. What do you mean Lorne didn't look at him? It feeds on memory. Emotion. Suffering. It survives through echoes. The more we hurt, the louder we get. The more real it becomes. She looked up slowly. Her eyes were dark. It's not hunting us. We're giving birth to it. That night, the entity revealed its shape. Not on screens, not in light, but in collective memory. Across all 5 remaining ships, the crew dreamt the same thing. A battlefield under a black sky. Millions of humans, standing shoulder to shoulder. No weapons, just silence. And across from them, a single figure. Tall, pale. Its skin reflected pain like a mirror. Its arms opened wide, not in welcome, but in invitation. The humans didn't run. They walked forward. One by one, they whispered something into its ear, and with each whisper, the entity grew. By the time the last soldier reached it, the figure towered like a god. Then it turned toward. The dreamer Zan screamed. Not a sound of rage, but of perfect memory. It screamed every pain humans had ever felt. Every war, every betrayal, every cry from the dying, every mother's scream when her child fell silent. It echoed in all of them. And when they woke up, they wept. Even the hardened revenant soldiers, genetically trained to resist. All emotion they cried silently in their bunks, unable to stop. Not because they remembered something, but because the entity remembered for them. It was becoming human. It was becoming us, Commander. Voss called an emergency war council. Only 3 captains answered. The others were either missing, comatose, or no longer responding in words, just humming the entity's melody. Voss showed them the updated scan of the sphere. It was cracking, not in pieces, but in walls. Inside was no machine, no core, just a mirror. Thousands of floating human-shaped reflections. U's. Made of memory, echo, and raw emotion. As if every member of the fleet had been copied in full and suspended their clones. Asked one officer. Voss shook his head. No echoes. He explained what he now believed. The entity didn't start this. It was made by someone something long ago. A dying species tried to escape extinction by uploading its collective soul. They failed, instead of saving themselves. They gave birth to a parasite of memory, a creature that only lives when others hurt, and humans. We were perfect food, because humans never let go. Of pain, we write it, sing it, bury it, but we never forget it. We build monuments to it, we name planets after it, we wrap our identity around it. And that meant we were the perfect host, the entity. Wasn't killing the fleet, it was growing from it. Voss made the call. Operation. Ash silence. Every soul core on every ship would be burned. All memory storage would be purged. All names erased. They would give the entity nothing. Only silence. Only. Empty. But the crew resisted. Not because they were weak. Because the entity whispered in their own voices. It told them things. They had buried regrets, secrets, guilt, and in return, it offered relief. I will carry your pain, it said. I will be your memory. Some believed it, some gave in. They walked to the nearest core station and stood there, letting the data stream into the sphere, becoming part of its library. Lauren found two officers humming softly beside a soul station. Their eyes empty. She shot them both before they could finish uploading, when Voss found her. She had blood on her hands and a single line carved into her arm with a tool. If pain is a weapon, let me be a sword. The next day, the sphere spoke again, this time, in Voss's voice. You came with your fleet. You came to kill gods. But I am not a god. I am your truth. And then it said something that froze every heart. I was born in a scream, but now I want to sing. The black sphere pulsed, and the stars beyond it bent like metal. It had enough. Its memories now. Enough pain. Enough of them. And it began to evolve. Not just mimic, but create a new voice for the universe. Half human, half human. Half echo. Voss gave one final command. Strip the ship. Burn the files. No more names. No more pain. Let it starve. And one by one, they began the great forgetting. But deep in the entity's cord, the first echo of humanity smiled and sang louder. Commander Elias Voss no longer used his name. Identity had been purged during the great forgetting. So had the names of the remaining 4 ships. No more titles, no ranks, just roles, just duty, just silence. And yet, entity still remembered it. Whispered names in the dark, like wind through a broken hole. Elias, Mira, Reese, Mother, Son, Help. Each whisper came with the exact tone of lost voices, some dead, some still alive. Entity had recorded everything. But now, it was rebuilding them, not as ghosts, as tools. The Revenant fleet had been the most dangerous force humanity ever created. Each ship was armed with weapons banned across 10 galactic treaties. Each soldier was trained to operate in dead zones, under memory corruption, inside collapsed dimensions. They were not just human, they were prepared, and now they were the last. Firewall, in orbit, around the entity, floating in the cold of nowhere. The fleet prepared for the final battle, not to win, but to make sure it never left this place. Because the entity had changed. It no longer needed their memories. It had begun to think for itself, and its first thought was escape. The sphere split open, not shattered, not exploded. Unfolded from its core came a structure neither ship nor a creature, a shape made of reflections humming with stolen identity. It looked like every ship in the fleet, every soldier, Every loss humanity had buried. The entity had built its own version of the Revenant fleet. It knew their tactics, their plans, their minds, and it had made copies echoes in perfect detail. Now they hovered in formation, facing the original fleet. In absolute silence, every system on the Vow screamed, "Do not engage." But Voss and Name now, stripped of memory, gave the only answer that mattered: begin. The battle was not like any war in history. It was quiet, no explosions, no screams. Just sudden flashes of disappearing holes, EMP ripples, gravity bends, and light mass warheads that erased matter before it could react. But the enemy didn't die. Every destroyed eco-ship simply reformed, not instantly, gradually, like it was being remembered. It's back into existence. The fleet adapted. They began targeting the idea of the enemy. Their weapons were no longer physical. They became psychological, neural. Blades. Identity bombs. Soul rupture torpedoes. Each designed to strike not the body but the memory that held the shape. On Ship 3, an experimental weapon was deployed, the Mirror Breaker. It was a cube. Silent. Cold. Once activated, it would erase every trace of the operator's identity, then emit a pulse of absolute forgetfulness within a 300-meter radius. Everything inside it would cease to be remembered. And in this war, that meant death. True death. No echo. No comeback. The first Mirror Breaker was detonated deep inside one of the Echo ships. The pulse hit, and for the first time, the enemy didn't reform. It was forgotten, gone. The fleet had found a weakness, but the entity learned fast. The next wave of Echo ships didn't copy the Revenant fleet. They copied Earth, cities, homes, families, a school, a child, a hospital ship marked with red and white. One crew member screamed when they saw it, because it looked exactly like the station where her sister died. The entity was no longer fighting with power, it was using familiarity, attachment, and pain. Commander Voss gave the new order: forget Earth. His officers nodded. Silently, they entered the soulburner chamber. Each memory erased manually. No Earth, no family. Nothing left for the entity to reach. Each man and woman emerged hollow. But that was the price: to kill the enemy. To become something even the entity couldn't copy. Nameless. Empty. Silent then. The entity made its final move. It pulled the Vow, the last true command ship, into itself. No explosion, just absorption. One moment it was there, the next it was inside. But Voss was ready. He stood alone in the soul core chamber, holding the last Mirror Breaker, and for the first time in the entire mission, he smiled, because he knew what the entity didn't pain wasn't the only thing humanity carried. They also carried choice and sacrifice. He activated the core inside the sphere. Time fractured, memory scattered. The entity felt its own thoughts unravel. It tried to scream, but screaming is a sound. And Voss had made the final battlefield a place of absolute silence. No thoughts, no echoes, only forgetting, and the entity, for all its power, had never learned how to forget. Only humans knew how to bury their dead and keep walking. The fleet watched as the black sphere shook, cracked, and folded into itself, becoming smaller and smaller, until at last it was gone. Nothing left. Not even light, just silence. And in that silence, the fleet floated alone. No leader, no voice, no memory of what they had done, but still, live, human, and dangerous. No records survived, not the names of the ships, not the logs of the commanders, not the screams, not the decision that ended it. The black sphere was gone, not destroyed, forgotten. Nothing in the galaxy remembered where it had been or what it had done. The stars realigned. The void stitched itself closed. Space, wounded and bent, now floated still. But the fleet still existed. Fewer now, dimmer and dim. Change deep in the silence, a single ship drifted alone, powerless, unarmed, stripped of all identity. Inside it, a man sat at the helm. He wore no name patch, no rank. He had no memory of his own face, no crew, no mission left, only a cold, slow-burning fire in his chest, the ship's AIA primitive voice system. The only one left untouched spoke quietly through static. "What now?" The man did not answer, because he wasn't sure. He remembered pain. Not his, everyone's. It had lived in the shape of their dead, regrets. Their softest memories twisted into weapons. It had become them, and yet they won. Not by fighting harder, but by choosing silence in a galaxy that always screams. That was humanity's final weapon. Not technology, not numbers, not fury, but the ability. To let go, to bury the past, to carry pain without letting it define them. On the far side of the dead zone, Earth waited. They had received fragments of what happened. A signal spike, static trails. Burned echoes that meant nothing without context. But something inside them still felt it. A chill, a pause, a sense that something dark had reached toward. The man failed, and though they had no evidence, built a monument anyway, a black tower. On the moon's dark side, no name, no flag, no lights, just a single message etched into its base. We remembered so the stars could forget. We hurt so others wouldn't have to. And in the end, when it screamed, we stayed silent. But not all was peace, because the silence didn't mean safety. It meant responsibility. The survivors of the Revenant fleet didn't return home. They couldn't. They were no longer entirely human, not corrupted, but sharpened, refined by an enemy that tested. Memory itself, and what they brought back, was knowledge how to end voices that should not speak, how to build ships that leave no trace, how to disappear, something so completely that even time loses track of it. They became Earth's final option. The answer to things that shouldn't exist. They were remembered only in myth, by whispers among soldiers, by black entries in redacted reports, by children born with deep eyes and distant thoughts. And every few decades, when something strange appeared in deep space, something that looked too familiar, to knowing a single ship would be seen on the edge of the event? No. ID no heat signature, no crew manifests, just a hull that reflected nothing, and a single phrase painted in dark metal above the airlock. We don't forget. The galaxy would move on. It would discover wonders. New empires would rise. Old enemies would fall. But somewhere, always watching, was the fleet broken, silent, but ready. Because if it ever returned, if the scream found another voice, if someone somewhere decided to answer again, the fleet would. It's deploy. Quiet, lethal, human, and carrying within them the last memory of pain the stars would ever need.